Welcome to the Small Church Podcast. I'm Boyd.
I'm Alex.
And I'm John.
Today we will be talking in episode 3 of our podcast titled Wait, What? A little recap from last week. We talked in February of 23 last week. We had some pretty important details of our personal lives, including me and my wife. We talked about the losing of our child. We talked about the storage building that we were trying to do. That was kind of the biggest part of the episode, was talking about the storage building, where the church was going with it. We did a fundraiser. We raffled off a gun. Might be in a small church if you're raffling off guns in the church to fundraise money for a storage building. But we raised around $8,000 or $8,800, I think it was. So we had a really good fundraiser for that. And we talked about how we had the confidence to build a storage building. And we talked about, we had recently remodeled the sanctuary a couple years before that. And it really led into us being able to believe that we could build a building all on its own. So I'm excited for what we have today, excited for the podcast. So before we get too deep into March 2023, let's catch up a little bit with John and Alex. Alex, tell me, it's Valentine's Day weekend. Tell me a little bit about your Valentine.
We spent Valentine's night at the hospital, just hanging out with our baby in the NICU. And that was day 88 in the NICU for him, so he's still living it up at the UAB NICU. I did get her flowers and a cupcake delivered to her office for Valentine's Day. That was a pleasant surprise for her. And then trying to remember what we actually ate for food. I want to say it was Church's chicken.
Church's chicken.
So, happy Valentine's Day. Church's chicken.
Yeah. They do call that the love chicken, I think.
Chicken of love.
Yeah.
The biscuits. You ever had the honey butter biscuits there?
Yeah, they are pretty good.
So good. They're so good.
All right, Alex. Well, I appreciate you telling us about your Valentine's Day. John, do you have anything special happen on your Valentine's Day?
Yeah, we had a pretty good Valentine's weekend. We went to Huntsville, spent a couple of days there. Just got back a few hours ago. We went to Texas Day, Brazil, somewhere we've eaten at several Valentine's Days. Something kind of we've made a tradition. We enjoy eating there. I got her some gifts. But my truck broke down, and that's where they were hidden. And so they're still in the truck. So the morning of Valentine's Day, she got a handwritten letter. So here in a week or so, she'll get her Valentine's Day gifts when I go to pick up that pickup truck.
I got you.
Was it on a Post-it note? Is that what you wrote the letter on?
No, I wrote it on just a piece of paper.
Oh, that's sweet.
That's
regular paper. The day that I asked her to be my girlfriend, this would have been in 2016. I put the old George Strait saying,
"Oh no, you didn't."
Yes or no.
Yes or no.
And so I did that again. I do it a lot for different things like this. It's kind of been a recurring inside joke, I guess you say. So this week I did, "Well, will you be my Valentine? Check yes or no." And she checked no. So I don't know where
you got to be cheesy as possible, huh?
Check no?
No, she didn't. She knows.
Just put maybe.
No, she didn't add the maybe. It's just she checked the yes.
That's so all. Tell me about the truck. You said your truck broke down, the old Dodge Ram.
Yeah, the Ram let me down. It basically $100 part cost me a $7,000 transmission. The thermostat for the transmission basically malfunctioned, and my trans temp got up to like 275 degrees and cooked my transmission. Transmission's been fine, nothing wrong with it. Like I said, that thermostat sticking caused it. So that's a bummer. So truck's in the shop right now. Hopefully I can get it back in the next week or week and a half. Hopefully. Not great time. Just put a new AC in my house this week. It's kind of, as Luke Combs says, when it rains, it pours.
Yeah. I know you got
some copyrights this episode. 2 country songs. You're going to kill us. We're going to get this pulled.
I know that that heat's bumping right now. We're having a little cold spell.
Yeah, and I hate being cold. First day that we had it, I think it got put in Thursday, and when Julie got home Thursday night, I had it on like 72. I was feeling great. I'm a little bit cold natured, which is uncommon for a big guy. But when she walked in the house, it was like a heat wave hit her. Before she came in and said hey to me, she bumped it down 4 or 5 degrees
Yeah.
and said it is cooking in here. And so that was my one day of warmth, I guess.
Yeah.
But yeah, that's
we
what
had
it looked like.
we had a eventful, I guess you could say, Valentine's Day weekend. We did not do nothing at all. Sadie has just got strep for the second time in like 3 weeks, so we were dealing with that. Woke up middle of the night, cold sweats. Had peed all over herself and stayed in the bed with us, kicking us all night. And that was Thursday or Friday night. And stayed sick, so we didn't get out. We were supposed to go eat at Firebird, so I was really looking forward to a good steak. And then Jordan needed some medicine, and last minute got to have it for tomorrow. And I drove to like every Walgreens in the county, and could not find any medicine. But finally, I found one in Northport. Got it. They gave me a hard time, but I got it. And made my way back. And I said, well, you know what? I'm just going to pick up the Old Faithful. And as you know, the Old Faithful, the old Japanese hibachi never lets you down. So we got hibachi and some sushi, and we ate dinner. And me, Jordan, and Sadie, and we just hung out for the night. That's all we did. We didn't do nothing the whole weekend. No plans. Jordan had to work on Saturday, so we really ain't done nothing. We talked about. I tried to talk. Jordan had to work last night. I tried to talk Sadie into go getting a steak with me just to go get one because I've been craving one so bad. But she doesn't want to leave. She's a big homebody. So well, that's good. Good catching up. We're going to talk about our verse for the week, and we'll dive into March 2023. I picked out our verse for the week that we'll discuss. It's Proverbs 16:9. This is a Christian Standard Bible. A person's heart plans his way, but the Lord determines his steps. So in March 2023 for me, we had a very eventful month. We did a friends group crawfish boil. I remember, it was all of us plus 3 or 4 other couples. We sat on my back porch. We cooked crawfish, messed around, tried to get some of the kids to touch the painters. Just had a good time. Crawfish, shrimp, corn, and stuff like that. I think you did the deviled eggs with the shrimp on top, and I still remember those.
Who cooked the crawfish?
You did.
Oh yeah, was it good?
Yeah.
Okay.
Just had to add that in there. Just had to add that in there. Yeah.
I take pride in my bulls.
A humble spirit.
Yeah. We need to get into a different verse in Proverbs. Actually, we're going to swap it up real quick. But no, we had a good time. I feel like that whole month of March, and I know this sounds crazy, but I feel like me and Jordan just tried to act normal. We had all these different events going on. We had a lot in life going on, and we just said, we were coping with the loss of losing a child, and we said, let's see if it works just acting like it never happened. I think a lot of people in life do that. And like similar to what the verse is saying, I'm not trying to take it too much out of context, but we had a plan, and we were trying to have a baby. We had tried for 4 or 5 months to even get pregnant, and we were planning to just live life as normal, and then out of nowhere kind of got swept off our feet, I guess you could say. But we tried to keep going, and I think a lot of people try to do that whenever they're dealing with stuff and they don't grieve with it. The best possible. You just try to act like. I remember the next Sunday we're at church. We don't miss church, and it could have been an all out prayer for everybody, and I think we did have a little prayer service, but rest of the life is just normal. How do you act? Either y'all have anything you want to tag in on that?
I remember in March of that year, the 3 of us and our wives actually got together for really the first time, just the 6 of us to hang out. and of course Sadie was there, and as you mentioned earlier, Wells wasn't born yet. I think was Riley. He wasn't. He was. How old was he at that point? Was he
Probably
about to be
He
born?
was 6 or 7 months.
March.
6 or 7 months,
He would have been like 8 or 9 months,
Yeah.
or 9 or 10
8 or 9
months.
months.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I don't think he'll had him there that night. He must have been somewhere else because Sadie was the only child there. But I remember we all got together and had steaks at a restaurant that's pretty famous in our neck of the woods. And I just remember telling Ashley when we were on our way home, I was like, I'm excited to move back to Alabama because I think we're gonna step into a group of people that we're gonna have lifelong friendships with. And like if every time we hang out is like that, because it was just nonstop laughs and jokes and stories, great food, and that's pretty much the basis of all we do.
Yeah.
And that was kind of a preview for us, and it really solidified in us that we are doing the right thing by moving back. So, and
Yeah.
that steak was so good, golly.
Yeah. Yeah, and I mean, a couple just more things to tag along to what we had that month. I remember one night we had it might have just been John, you and Julie over, but we made sushi. I don't know if you remember that. We made our own sushi at the house, and we haven't done that probably 2 times since, but it was
Oh,
awesome.
good.
I just enjoyed doing it. We went to the zoo with my stepbrother and John and his wife, and just let the kids play a zoo in town, and we had a really good time. Small zoo, local business, and it was just it's not crowds, it's not crowds and crowds of people. It's grass. It's not a bunch of concrete everywhere, so it's well kept. We had a really good time doing that, but it felt like one event after another. We were just trying to cope by just I guess covering our eyes from what was going on. Crawfish boil, the sushi, and then all that other stuff. That was kind of our month of March. We had the DNC that month, which was really hard on Jordan. It's not something that I can speak a lot about. I think as a husband, I think the hardest part is just knowing what to say, knowing how to be a spiritual leader, and knowing how to move forward. And I don't, and I think I didn't do the best job of it because mine was just try to keep the train on the tracks. And I think that's what most men do. They just try to keep everything moving. Um, I wouldn't say that was the best route to take, but it was something we needed to keep our eyes on the Lord, to not get too down. And something we've always tried to deal with is, we tend to seem like we got to be the ones that keep it together, so that way everybody else can, come to us if they need us. And sometimes being the strong one can be tough. Not wanting to talk about stuff you're going through and not really handling those situations the best we possibly could. But I know that was just kind of how I felt whenever we were going through it. It's just we got to be tough because when other people do, that's a story that we're going to get to share to share people to bring people to the Lord. Um, for men's group that month, we're still doing the serve month, which is still our serve year is exciting. So we were messaging. I remember I put out on the Nextdoor app. We're going to help. We're a church in the community. We want to give back to the community. We want to help. I had a lady message me and she said, "Look, I need help with my back porch." She said, "It's got run down." That's to say the least. It was just a widow living by herself. She was 40-ish years old, something like that, 40, maybe early 50s. And she said, "I need help. I don't really have a bed in my life." And I said, "Okay, we'll come help clean up your back porch. No big deal." I thought, it's going to be a good time. I think John, what do you think? We had close to 15 to
Yeah,
20 guys there.
I was thinking 12 to 16. Yeah.
Yeah,
It was
15.
a
Yeah, it was a good bit of guys. And I'm like, clean off this lady's porch, no time. And, I asked her what we should bring, and she said, "Just trash bags, stuff like that, something to haul the stuff away with." So we brought a bunch of truck beds, and I tell you, and I'll post pictures whenever we can, but I think we hauled away like 4 truck beds of trash. I remember my brand new truck at the time. I mean, probably wasn't a year, 2 years old, full of just random stuff. Like we got on our porch, Alex, and it was covered. You couldn't walk anywhere. How big was the porch, Sean?
Probably 12 by, it was kind of 2 layers. The first
Yeah.
little spot was like, probably 10 by 8, and then the other side was probably 10 by 12. I mean, it was
Yeah, it wasn't
half
big, but
of
it
it
was
was
like
covered and or enclosed, so it was kinda stacked. When you got walled, you can stack stuff up good. And she used the space well.
And there was nothing when we got done. There was nothing there. We were using like old signs to literally scrape up stuff off the floor. I mean, it was the Lord protected us from tetanus for sure. I mean, it was
And
it
it was
was a tough
slippery.
one.
I remember I was looking at pictures earlier, and I was cutting trees down. I say trees, like shrubbery, like saplings, you know, size of your wrist stuff with a sawzall.
Yeah, anything she could get, she was like,
Yeah.
"Y'all are here, just go ahead and do that." We couldn't all fit on the porch, so some people trying to pick up the backyard. She had dogs, so that's a lot of it. The dogs were on the back porch, and it was mess everywhere, and it was, man, it was nasty. But we did a good job. At the end of it, it looked great.
Mhm.
Um, we have a good buddy of ours, and I have a picture of him at the time, and he was our moral support guy. He was sitting under the garage. I have a picture of him just talking on the phone. We'll call him Shannon, and he was just moral support, which he's an older guy, but he was always he helped lead men's group. He was a real close friend of mine, and we had a great time. But he was a guy who, like, you miss a spot, but he's over there sitting on a chair, and he's just pulling your leg. Big county worker guy, if y'all know what county workers are about. You see 12 of them on the side of the road, and only one of them working. Um, and he did work for the county, but uh, but yeah, that was pretty much my month of March. We tried to live as the plans that we had, the steps we had, and tried to act like nothing was really changing, uh, as our world was kind of, I wouldn't say falling apart, but as our world was kind of taking some hits at the time. And we didn't really know why we were going through that. We know a little bit now, but I mean, it's a learning thing. It's something that I'll always have to be able to tell people about premarital counseling, stuff like that. Just to be able to tell people how often it happens and to help people get through it and to realize, that's not the end. I guess the end destination, but it's just something that some people walk through. And we got to be able to help others in that walk through it, and how to be able to deal with that grief properly, and how to just take the time to really understand that the Lord still loves you regardless, and no matter what you have planned out, no matter what you have in front of you, focusing on His will is always perfect. So I guess we'll go to Alex next. Alex, tell me a little bit about your month of March. Give us a little recap.
Yeah, we had a wedding to go to. Her one of her cousins got married on a farm in West Alabama. It was nice. I remember myself going to the wedding, and once like the reception got started, I kind of filtered outside and followed along with the Alabama Sweet 16 basketball game since they were number one seed. They lost that game, and that was frustrating. But it was another month where I was just kind of planning for what I thought was my dream job. So I was still studying up, and that's why Proverbs 16:9 right there. It kind of speaks to me because I was kind of trying to determine my steps.
Yeah.
I didn't know it at the time, and I certainly didn't want to admit it out loud that I was doing all that without getting where I wanted to go. I mean, there was a reason for it, but like you said, a lot of times you don't know why certain things happen. You don't know why you do all this planning and then you get to the end of it and it doesn't happen the way you do. You're like, well, why?
Yeah.
And we don't really get the answers a lot of times. It's not for us to understand until you see the big picture of life. And that going on. And then that month, Ashley actually got her job offer. That was a big deal. That kind of solidified us moving back to Tuscaloosa because we didn't know we were hopeful, but we weren't going to move back to Tuscaloosa without a job offer. So she got a job offer, and we actually got it on the way. We went to 2 weddings that month, and one was in the Mississippi Delta. You ever been in the Mississippi Delta?
I haven't.
It's man, it is a long drive to get out there because all the highways are like 50-mile-per-hour speed limits. So it took a while to get there, but we got about halfway there, and she gets a job offer on the phone. So it turned that weekend into kind of a celebration weekend. We were able to celebrate one of her friends in school that was getting married. It was a blast. It was one of those weekends that you just get to celebrate what God's done for you.
Yeah.
And we sometimes we hit rough patches with our job, and we kind of look back on those moments where we just praise God so much for delivering that job to her that sometimes in life we forget what all He's done,
Yeah.
and you have to remind yourself, where were you when it first happened? Remember the joy of that. And
Yeah.
going through tough seasons lately, we have to remember the joy of. I mean, I'd forgotten all about how excited we were to get that
Yeah.
job
You
offer until
prayed for that. Yeah.
yeah, like you pray a job in, and then you let a bad day at work kind of ruin
Yeah.
your viewpoint, what you prayed in for, and it can probably be that way for parenting. You have a bad day with your kid, and you're like, you get to the end and you're frustrated, but you prayed in that child, and
Yeah.
that's where we are. We prayed in our child. He's in the NICU, but we prayed for him for months and months on end. So when he has a rough day, we don't try to focus on that. We try to focus on that's what we prayed for. He is a literal
Yeah.
answered prayer. So
That's
it was
right.
a month of an answered prayer, that's for sure.
That's right. Pastor talked. He preached a couple sermons about it a couple years back about landmark moments, about making those moments in your life, a landmark that you can look back on and be like, I need to be more thankful for that. I really need to remember what God did, that miracle that He did. And that'll be another good outcome of this podcast, of being able to look back in some of those moments and be like, I didn't realize, or I'm not as grateful as I was then. Like God really made a miracle in modern day time, and we just looked over it. Or not that we looked over it, but then, and like you were saying, we have a bad day and we're just not as thankful as we used to be. Um, yeah, yeah, that's really good. Really good, Alex. What about you, John? John, you got a little month of March recap for us? March
Yeah.
23rd?
Beginning of March was Riley's first haircut. I was looking at pictures and like very first few days of the month, something like that. He looking back, why we didn't cut his hair way before we did, I don't know, because it looked terrible. He
Yeah.
had so much hair, and you couldn't tame it. Um, and then how much cuter he got once he was a little bit, got a little trim. Um, so I found some other pictures of softball season starting. So that's something I don't do anymore, but I had a lot of fun doing it. Um, and then the really the last thing, it was kind of a quiet month for me, but um, one of the last days of the month, I was coming down from the parsonage, and I took a picture of kind. You guys know, but for the listeners, from the driveway of the parsonage, you can basically look at the whole church property.
Yeah.
And what was a big gravel area and a bunch of kids playing in it. I guess it may have been a Wednesday night. I'm not sure. I didn't look too much into the date. I know it was like the 29th or 30th of March. And to know now, what's out there,
Yeah.
is crazy. But um, I don't know. There's so much work and effort and time and sweat and money and tears and
Yeah.
frustration and thankfulness. I mean, there's a lot of things were going through my mind, I guess, but to see that it was a lot different 2 years ago.
Yeah.
But
Yeah. I
I'm
think
along.
that kind of ties into our title. Wait, what? Just how did we get here? How did we get here? You think of all those things, and it literally takes every step to get to where we got. We had to go through all these seasons in life to get to where we are. And like we're talking about, we don't always understand, and we can put so much emphasis to make it perfect our way. But the end goal, if it's going to work out the right way, it's going to be God's way. And just allowing that to happen, regardless of, like you were saying, Alex, regardless of how much we put in, at the end of the day, if God's saying this is how it needs to go, releasing it to Him and saying, okay, God, I'm with it. I'm going with you. So, before we get into our big church March 2023 topic and into our title, we'll do our digi update of the week. A little theme song for that. Um, John, you got us a digi for you start us off.
I don't think I have one. I mean,
Oh my gosh, way to let us down off the
other,
rip.
other than, and I'll get back on the humility, the humble train here in a minute. Other than, did you see the treasurer take a day off and then still show up on his day off?
Oh my gosh,
I
here
saw
we
that.
go. Where's that
Okay,
humble pie we were talking about?
it's over here sitting right here. I'm gonna eat it in a second. That's all I got though. I came to church late, just to do
With
kind of.
shorts on. With the treasurer shows up, grabs the tithe baskets with shorts on and a t-shirt. Did you have a sun hat on?
I had a hat on, but I took it off and held it in my hands. I didn't wear it in the
I
sanctuary.
don't know if it was held in his hand while he was walking down the aisles.
Yeah, I had it off. Yeah, I did come in shorts.
That's all
I
right. Me and Alex will hold this episode together. Tell us, Alex, what you got for us on the Did You Update of the week?
think I know what he's gonna say. Go ahead.
I was gonna say the shorts.
Yeah.
I turned around and stayed in the back. The service is over. We're all doing our 17th greeting of the day. And I turn to my right and I see this bright white light. And I'm like, what in the world is Jesus back? And then it's John's legs. I'm seeing John's legs. Did you see John's legs at church?
I don't wear shorts much.
He don't wear shorts. He wears shorts at home all the time. He does not wear them outdoors.
Oh my gosh.
And
I think they were basketball shorts.
they, for a second, I had to look at Ashley's. Am I looking at John's legs right now? And she goes, I think we all are. They're blinding us.
And then I
Um,
proceeded to show you my calves.
And yeah, and it looked like you were having a cramp when you were flexing them. I was like, "Are you okay? You like you're having a cramp there? You having a Charlie horse?" But
just
my did you would be, did you see the guy who did the offering and did not have the mic on the entire time?
oh my gosh.
I was talking as if it was on.
I know.
I get to the back and Jordan's like, "So did you know the mic wasn't working?" I said, "I did not. Just went with
Oh, me. That's almost as bad as so I was having to run media today. That's almost as bad as like I don't know when I should cut Pastor's mic off because it goes in and out so much. It's like how long do I let it go before I just cut it off? You know what I mean? It's that one mic he uses, that ear set. It gives us trouble sometimes. Sometimes it works perfect, but sometimes it's like he'll talk for 2 minutes, it's great, and then he'll talk for 2 minutes and it's out.
I hate to tell you, but it's all the mics. It's
Yeah.
the little receiver back there. It doesn't work very well. And
Yeah.
if you go to certain sides of the pulpit, you're gonna cut out.
Yeah. I guess my digi of the week's got to be a full week recap. Then y'all didn't bring enough for me, so we'll start with Wednesday night. We got out of service Wednesday night, and it was a brutal night in nursery. We'll just leave it at that. But we got out of service, and it was a monsooning outside, and we're in two separate buildings, and we had no awning. We have nothing for people to park under. We've got people running outside to their cars, guys pulling up one at a time, trying to pick their family members up, their kids, in a mud pile outside at that. And that's something we're trying to work on right now is getting that fixed. But in a mud pile, just getting kids in the car, and I had security that night, so I was there till the end of it, and brutal, brutal. Moving on to Sunday, everybody's sick. We have one of our worst attendance in months, probably in years, and our sound people are sick, our media people sick, half the worship team. I thought they were gonna let me do a special today. They didn't. Um,
Thank God.
but we had to do YouTube worship because our power went out. You're in a small church if you're running YouTube for your worship team. Pastor gets up there and he says, "We brought the worship team all the way from wherever, just brought them here." But it was a weird service today. We didn't have no verses up on screen. I mean, it felt weird. And then the very end, the real did you hear me play 3 different songs during prayer time? He was closing, and John texted me. I only did it because John texted me. So John's in the fellowship hall waiting to come up into service. And he said, "Is he closing?" I said, "Yeah, he's closing." He said, "Have you put on some soft music yet?" So now I'm thinking, I got to turn on some soft music. What am I doing? I'm the only one in the booth back here. And I'm like, okay. And I look on Spotify and my wife has put a song up there. And I'm like, okay, well, I guess this is a song she wants me to play. Well, I start playing it and I start cranking it up a little bit, as he's getting ready to pray and he's closing. And it starts, really elevating. And we're like, in a I don't know, at Winter Jam, I guess. I mean, Like it's starting to get intense. It's not the mood we were looking for. And so I down do the volume and I turn on another song and I'm like, I don't know if this is great either. And I said, oh, there's an instrumental playlist. So I finally went to the instrumental playlist and my wife texted me. She's like, don't play any music. Just let it go. After all that, I played 3 songs. And I could just imagine if you're a pastor or you're sitting on the front row, like, what is he doing back there? Just clicking on songs?
Just
I mean,
clicking
it was,
buttons.
yeah, like, who's in the booth back here? So I might not be, that I'm just fill in, but I might not even get to fill in anymore.
That was bad. I remember hearing the first song start playing, and it was upbeat, but it was kinda the volume was so low, I thought, "Is somebody playing that on their phone right now? Is someone
Is
literally playing
phone?
Spotify on their
Is
phone a couple rows behind me?"
somebody's phone
And then I
ringing?
realized it's coming out of our speakers.
Yeah,
I'm
somebody
thinking,
said, if he can go play soft music, I'll play it right now on my phone for him. You
like,
know.
I was like, "That's not closing music at all."
So to be fair, the church treasurer wearing shorts is the one who put us in a bad spot on that.
Mm.
So that was the Did Ya update of the week. So back to March 2023, the last big thing we got to talk about, in kind of the encompassing part of our title, the verse behind it all will be the sudden change from a storage building. So we really talked about last couple episodes how important it was from a storage building. We had Alex, you weren't a part of it then, but we had, I kid you not, probably a Zoom meeting a week. We were talking about how we were going to do it all. We were talking about, how we were going to put together the team, the finances, and really, is this what we need to do? And we had already decided on it. And at a small church, that's one of the problems that we deal with a lot more than we should. We decide on stuff, and then we're like, should we really though? And then we talk about it more than we should. Um, it's not a fun thing to do sometimes, but this was a good one. This was one we kept talking about it. We were zooming for like a year before this because we were already in such a tight position of needing room, needing storage. What did we need more? Women were giving us the most pushback about storage, so that's kind of why we went that way. Um, but after all that, we transitioned into building a building. I remember John coming on the Zoom call and was like, I've been thinking about it. What if we just built a building, with a storage room in it? And I was like, who's going to do that? How do we only raised 8,000, John, $8,000, John. I know you got 20,000 tickets, but how many guns you got to give away?
Yeah.
You know, when he said that, I was like, I couldn't believe it. But looking back on it now, just we had such big plans of that storage building, and we were really, really excited about it. But it's crazy how God changed it in a snap of His fingers, and really put us on the right path of we need more than just a storage building. We needed rooms. We had I remember this is crazy, but I remember in 2023 walking in to my tax office, and this was like beginning of March, and in the tax office, they have a partition that comes out of the wall that pulls and separates the room. And I literally asked the tax people where they got that and how they got it and how expensive it was because we needed a partition just to have classes on Wednesday nights.
Mhm.
Um, I mean, we were in such a brutal spot, and we were like, you know what? We really got to transition. We need to build a building. So we went from building what did you say the square footage was on the storage building?
I think it was 16 by 30, something like that.
16 by 30. So we're talking that's 600, 780. That's 780 square foot. I think if my math is right. We went to ending up building a 40 by 50 building, 2,000 square foot building. So triple that of the storage building. And for all of you that might be contractors, knowing that doesn't mean triple the price. And that's what I asked John. That was the first thing I said. Does that mean we only need to raise like two more guns we need to give away? And it was like, no, it was a whole ordeal. Um, but I remember, it all fell into place. And that's kind of what if you hear us talking about the youth building, that's what we built. We built a youth center, youth and kids center kind of building. We have a storage room, we have a youth room, we have two kids rooms, we have 4 bathrooms, a hallway. Um, you know, it's crazy to think we were talking so much about a storage building, and it just in a month it swapped, and everybody we had to bring it before the church. I remember we brought it on like maybe the end of March. Brought it to the church, Alex, and we had a vote. Everybody had to vote because we had all donated money towards a storage building. So if we were going to transition where that money went to, we had to vote. And we literally, we brought everybody in on Wednesday and we said, look, this is what we're thinking about doing. Who's behind us? And we had 100%. Everybody understood. Um, but it was amazing. I don't know how we had I guess it was the confidence of the Lord. But I don't know how we had the confidence of even building a storage building, but going to an actual building. And that will be our main topic over the next 10 episodes or however long, because we spent a while building this building and it's done now as we speak of it. But, it's wow, what a process. Alex, do you remember around that time hearing anything about the transition from a storage building to a building?
I remember you and I with Ashley. I remember Jordan was in a wedding of a sorority sister. And for the audience, Jordan and Ashley, our wives, are sorority sisters. And Biggs, little, there's something. I don't know. Anyway, we were at this wedding in Birmingham, and you were talking at the time that this was what, 2021 maybe? And y'all were talking about a building.
Yeah.
You thought, well, within the next 10 years, we'll need to build a metal building. And you were trying to figure out how that would work. And that was a 10-year plan.
Yeah.
And I remember asking Ashley, I was like, a 10-year plan to build a metal building. I was like, why are they overanalyzing it like that? They're really thinking hard about that. And then the night that we all got dinner, you mentioned, yep, we're actually moving forward with a storage building. We're going to build a storage building. I'm like, oh, that's cool. And I'm thinking, why don't they just get one sent to there? And then the next time you tell me about it, oh yeah, we're actually going to build an entire building that's this big. And I'm thinking, what happened what happened to make it escalate so much? Where did you get the money? Because you were telling me the price. I'm like, where are you getting the money? Because at the time, I remember when you said in 2021 that you would want to borrow X number of dollars
Yeah.
to build a new building. And I was like, whoa, where'd the money come from? So,
Yeah. A little preface, I mean, we were literally Zooming at least once a month from 2021 to 2023 talking about storage buildings, talking about, I think at one point, John, we talked about, like the school buildings, the little trailers they brought in. We talked about you trying to get one of those,
Portable.
to just have class in those.
Mhm.
But it was, man, we went through so many ideas. I'm telling you, if there was for a small church, you have to run through everything. With a limited amount of money, a little bit limited amount of resources, you have to really ponder on everything to figure out how we're going to get there. And that's what we did. I mean, for 2.5 years, we just discussed and discussed and discussed and agreed and jumped back and forth. And we sat on the storage building for a couple months and we raised some money and we said, look, I think John ran the numbers and he said, I've ran the numbers. Why don't we put all this towards a real building? And that's what we did, and God blessed us and we didn't have to borrow any money towards the building. Our initial goal was like 60,000. And I
Mhm.
remember I got some estimates. I'm a small business, so I work with some other contractors and stuff. I called a contractor in the area and he said, with it being a commercial building, probably a couple 100,000, 300,000, something like that. We had somebody say close to 1 million. Um, and man, it really knocks your head down. You hear numbers like that and you're like, how are we going to do it? How is, and we couldn't do it. God had to do it. Such a miracle. But so thankful for it. And it's something that we do look over now. I do think it's sometimes, we have that rainy day and we're like, it'd be nice to have something over your head to park under. But it's like God gave us this. God gave us this building. He allowed it to happen. He allowed us to build it and be debt free. But man, what a change. And the whole church, it just caught off guard. but so excited. I remember whenever we revamped the sanctuary several years before that, we were literally in like a state of the church meeting talking, and we are like, we need to remodel the sanctuary. And somebody said, well, let's do it. And we just did it. I mean, it was insane the jump we had, and that was kind of like the jump on this one. Well, John, if you want to kind of tell us a little bit about how we got the confidence to actually build this building from your perspective. I know you were the main one to run all the numbers and everything like I was just talking about. So you kind of led that charge. If you want to tell us, kind of what you were thinking on that, that'll be a good insight.
Yeah, I think for me, after we did the raffle and stuff that we talked about, raising the money for that, how smoothly that went, I think, when the wheels got to spinning about stepping it up and doing a building instead of a whole big building with other rooms, and at the time we didn't know what that looked like, but doing more than just a storage building. The reason that my wheels got to spinning about that, or really everybody, was because so I started doing the numbers and kind of considering, what can we do this for, and just it's almost like a let's just check, like let's just see what I think it'll cost, and really that's what I did. I just put pen to paper, did a bunch of research. I asked several of my contractor friends like what they thought it would cost, and got quotes and stuff from them, and I knew that that was not going to be feasible, but being somewhat in the industry in the electrical field, I've been around it enough where I know kind of what it's going to take to do it. And so I just started writing everything down that I thought what it would possibly take, and then just adding in maybe a little bit of a buffer. And I don't know, it just seemed doable based on what we had in the bank account too. Like my thoughts were like at the time, I was hoping we could do it based on so and there's more to it than this that we'll get into later, but I knew that projects like this, typically you get stuff donated when the right people hear about it. You have big companies or people in the church that just feel led to give in big ways. We considered like 60 something thousand what we thought we could do this for.
Yeah.
And that was really kind of based on doing everything pretty um I don't want to say bare minimum, but almost like not going super, super fancy on some of the stuff, but also considering that some stuff would be donated. And, with that in mind, um, we had like 50,000 in the bank, I think, when we started doing the project or right at it. So I figured if it don't cost but 60, even if we don't have a ton of I don't know what word I'm looking for. I don't want to say involvement because I know that we would have involvement as far as putting, the hands to the plow. But as far as the financial burden behind it, even if that didn't go exactly right, we really had the money to do most of it.
Yeah.
Um, and so that's kind of what my thoughts were behind it. And really, it worked out great. I mean, do you remember anything that was, different from that? I mean, I don't think that, and there really wasn't a lot of like planning as far as, or not even planning, but just the knowledge behind it. Like I'm not a general contractor. I'm not somebody that works for a big contracting company that has all this crazy experience. But I mean, a lot of my numbers that I was running was just going to the Lowe's website, and I knew. So you say we're going to build this building, and you do your studs on 16-inch centers, and really that's the knowledge that I had, and knowing how the building needed to be built and knowing how to build the building is two different things, right?
Yeah.
And we had a lot of help in the building, and really God blessed us with sending the right people at the right time that knew a little bit about each thing. Like you're not necessarily the greatest um, with the tools and all that stuff, but you're a great facilitator, right? You're able to get people on board and get people to work. Um, So God really just started sending people, or had sent people prior to this, really to the church that just knew a little bit about several different things, and it really just fell in place. Which I know we're going to get into that way more in depth later, but um,
Yeah, I'll say this. I'll say, if you go to a small church and you are thinking about making a big step, I think the biggest thing you gotta add in, like you said, we were projecting around 60,000. We were thinking, people are gonna donate and stuff. But I really think the biggest thing you gotta add in is faith.
yeah,
Faith is something that if you put it in there, if you believe God's gonna do it, He'll do it. And we've seen it time after time. For every big thing we've done, you have to have that faith that He's gonna take control. To where if we can't do it in the end, He'll do it.
yeah,
And that was the biggest thing. I think we had to have faith, or it would have never happened.
right,
Believing that God was going to use us, and believing that He was going to provide all the money we needed, believing that He was going to have people donate. We don't know who's going to donate stuff, but
right,
we knew people were going to donate. We knew God. That's one of the biggest things. When they talk about faith, it's how do you know it's faith, or how do you know it's God? Because you can't do it on your own. You really need God to do it, and that's been for all of our big projects. It's like, how are we gonna do this? I don't know, but God's gonna do it.
yeah,
And we believe it, and we're gonna just go. And that's what we did. We just let's do it. It
and
just takes somebody deciding it and having that faith and saying, I think it could be around this. If it's more, God will handle it. We'll do
mhm,
what we can. If we gotta, I remember talking about that. If we gotta build a shell and just show the church a shell, people will
mhm,
donate. People will start setting money aside, and saying, I want to see that room finished. Because that's how we thought it was going to happen. I want to see that youth room finished, or I want to see that bathroom finished, whatever it is. Um, but that was the big thing. Whenever we decided we're gonna go, it was just faith. We just had to
mhm,
trust God. If you're in a small church and you're listening to this and you say, we got some big decisions up ahead, you got to account for faith. You got to account for God, because He's going to do that extra 50% that you can't do.
yeah.
You know.
And it's crazy too because this is financially, and well, I'll just say financially, this project was multiples of something we've ever done.
Yeah.
Right. This was way bigger than something we've ever accomplished or tried for, strived for. And then the work part of it was multiples on top of that, I think.
Way. Yeah.
I
Way
mean,
more than we've ever taken
you
on.
know, but
Yeah, I mean, like you said, it's financially it was one of the biggest, because that's the thing in a small church. You don't know how much the money's going to go. You don't know how, you think how the money's kind of coming in. You're on a tight budget as it is. You're spending what you can here and there. We had a good bit saved up. I think we had when we're going to start the building. I think we had close to 50,000 saved up,
yeah.
which is a lot of money for a small church, honestly. But it
Mhm.
took years for us to save that up.
Yeah.
But because I remember before that, we did the church remodel, and that cost us about 15, 17,000. I remember a big decision before that was just buying an AC. We had an AC go out, and it's like $3,500, and everybody's like, what are we gonna do?
Yeah.
We had money for it, but it's just scary when things come up, because we're stewards of God's money,
Yeah.
and we're trying to use it to the best of our ability. How do we use it? Do we fundraise? Do we just buy it? We're just, we just, like I say, just a couple guys trying to figure it out as we go. We really, we thought this is what God had for us on this building. We knew that was what God had for us, because we had nothing else we could have done, and we knew we had to have God for it to happen, and He was with us the whole way. I'll say it. He never left us. It was never a time where we stressed. Now there was times where we worried about it getting done, or we worried about getting through one of the projects.
Mhm.
But and we'll talk about that as we go through it. But the biggest step, if you're going to take a big step in your church, or you're going to make a big move for God, it just takes one person to say, I think we can do it. I believe for it. And you
Yeah.
all to be on the same page. If you're all on the same page, just like the Acts 2 church, you can accomplish big things. God's going to be with you
Yeah.
in your unity as long as you're all on the same page.
And to add to that, like looking back, I don't know if it's the I don't want to use the word ignorance, but not knowing how difficult it would be, that I'm sure that helped us, because I think it would have been harder to talk us into doing it if we would have known how tired we would get, how long it would take us. But in from our perspective, we just thought even if we don't have a ton of help, we'll just do whatever it takes,
Yeah.
right? Even if it's 3 of us there finishing this thing halfway through, we were okay with that.
Yeah.
We were okay with taking any burden we had to make sure it got done.
That's right.
And I think that's the attitude you have to you have to have about it, because not everything you do as a church is going to have the same involvement as the last thing you did or
That's
the
right.
next thing you did. Not everything can be the biggest, most successful event.
Hands on. Yeah.
As far as people attending and helping, and especially with these longer projects like this, you're not going to have the same. People talk about Christmas and Easter services. Those are going to be your big services usually every year. Every other service in between that can't be those same numbers. Otherwise, those events or those days wouldn't be as important or as big, or there's a
Yeah.
reason that those days are bigger than others. But just not, being okay with the fact that there's going to be days where nobody shows up but us,
Yeah.
and really just saying, "It's what we got today. We'll do what we can," and making some progress, no matter what that day looked like.
I think, from the small church podcast, from where we started, from where the church started, it takes a good core, a good foundation almost. We had a good core group that in our elders group that was, no matter what happens, and our men that was going to be there to help, no matter what happens, like you said, we're going to finish it. Having that core, I would say, is the biggest thing for a small church. It's having those 2 or 3, 4 or 5, whoever you can get, that says, no matter what, I'm on fire for the Lord. I'm going to do what it takes. I'm going to, if it takes me, not paying extra truck on my truck this month, not eating out, to donate, to make these events happen, to make more for these fundraisers. It's taking the core that really believes in the vision and going with it. I I think that's just super big for our church and for our podcast and for everything. It's if we didn't have that core, we wouldn't be where we are. If it was just the pastor and nobody behind the vision, where would the church be today? It's hard for one person to take the step. So, but yeah, I think that was pretty good for this podcast. We talked a lot about the decision to get there and to change, and we'll get into the pre-planning next episode, and then the episode after that we'll be building. It happened very quick, but I appreciate you all for listening to the Small Church Podcast. John, if you want to close us in prayer.
Yep. Dear Lord, we want to thank you for this day. We want to thank you for the opportunity we have to tell whoever's listening, Lord, about our lives and about what we're going through, Lord, and about how we're trying to accomplish more things and bigger things for the kingdom, Lord. We're so thankful for this platform we have, Lord, no matter how big or small that might be. At this point, Lord, we're just thankful that we're able to share and put our memories on this website that we can look to back one day, Lord, and ponder on what you've done in our lives, Lord. We're so thankful for that. I pray that you would just be with us as we continue all of our journeys, whether it be personal or inside of our small church. Lord, I pray that you just be with us and guide us, Lord, and let everything we say and do just bring honor to your name, Lord. And we love you, and just keep us safe as we go throughout this week. In your name we pray. Amen.
Amen.